Hello, I'm going to show you how to make a ceramic paint palette today using clay. So I open the bag of clay and then I'm going to use a wire tool to slice it into a piece that is small enough to manage. And I'm closing up that bag, I weigh it, and I realize this is way too big. I need about a pound of clay to make a paint palette. But for this paint palette's example, I'm making it a little bit larger, so it's about 2 pounds. And so when you press for the rolling pin, do not press down as you get towards the edges because it will make those pieces really thin. You're going to go up a little bit with your pressure. And so then you're going to roll it out in all different directions. And then you're going to put your stencil on. Yours is going to be about the size of a half sheet of paper. Mine's a little bit bigger, but I'm going to take a wooden tool and I'm going to just trace it. You can take a pencil, you can take a needle tool, you can take whatever kind of like pointy, sharp tool that you want to trace it. And if you are looking at this, it feels like it's slow-mo, but this is actually the speed that I was cutting things out at. So I am just taking it slow and I'm just trying to make it as perfect as I can and get it cut out to be exactly the shape of my stencil. Okay, so just do the best that you can. And you see I'm doing a little bit of like a chopping motion, like I'm like slicing it. And that's for like those little tiny corners and edges because I don't have a needle tool. So I'm using this wooden tool and I'm just trying to be as careful as possible and get it cut out exactly the shape of my paper stencil. Okay, so after you get that cut out, you're going to pull away all that extra clay and you're going to kind of like clean up all of those edges, get away any extra clay that you weren't able to get with that paper in the way. And then you're going to go back, put the paper back down, and then you're going to take that wooden tool and you're basically just going to trace every single mark that you made with pencil. And then what this is going to do is going to create basically the exact same thing on your paper on your clay because you're going to make little indentations where you're tracing, and then this is going to be your guide for when you need to try and carve out all of the pieces, or if you're trying to add walls to make your little paint palette paint slots. So that's just what I'm doing is I'm just going around and I'm tracing every single line, every single circle that I have on my stencil. And then when I'm done, I'm going to take a loop tool and I'm just going to carve it out, and I'm going to go and try and clean it up and try and smooth it out. And I'm just testing out a bunch of different tools. So that's a rubber tool right there. And I'm like, yeah, this looks pretty good. And then I'm just using the wooden tool to kind of carve those shapes. So now I'm going to take vinegar instead of slip because vinegar actually does a better job, from what I've noticed, to hold the clay pieces together and kind of have that stronger bond. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of vinegar in there, and I've got a coil and I put vinegar on the coil. And the reason I'm putting this coil in here is because I realized I don't want it to have like super 90-degree angle flat walls because it's going to be really hard to get the paint out and clean it. So I kind of want it to be a little bit of a slope, kind of like a ramp. So I put that coil in there and I'm just blending it with the wooden tool, and then I will smooth it out the best that I can. And I'm, again, just experimenting with different kinds of tools to find what works best. If I did not have nails, I would just use my finger, but I have fake nails on, so I couldn't do that. It would just scratch the clay. So then I'm taking the wooden tool, and just trying to carve out the face part of the moon. And I am just, again, experimenting with different tools. So it's totally up to you. You can experiment with all of the different tools. I found this little wooden tool that's got like a curved top. And so I was using that and I realized, wow, this looks really good. It really flattens and smooths the circle to have that like kind of curved ramp paint slot. So now I'm just going in, I'm carving, and you see how slow I'm going? Like I am taking my time. This is going to take forever, it feels like, but it's going to be totally worth it when you have a completed paint palette that actually has good craftsmanship. Like you are going to be so proud of it and you are going to want to probably keep it for a long time. So anyway, I'm just taking the wooden tool and I'm just carving, I'm cleaning up areas, trying to clean up those walls. I'm making this indentation deeper so that it is more obvious that that is the moon shape and that those other shapes are the cloud shapes. And any of those like little guys, I don't know what to call them, but I always just call them little guys, those little ball shaped pieces of clay that kind of appear when you are starting to carve. I just try and use either the wooden tool or a rubber tool to try and clean it up. And so this is a rubber tool. Love these rubber tools. They do kind of break sometimes pretty easily, and I've had these ones for a few years, so I don't end up using the rubber tool for the rest of the video because I accidentally broke it. So the like rubber part popped out and I couldn't get it back in. So I'm using the loop tool and I'm just carving out this cloud shape, and I'm just doing the best I can to leave like a little bit of a wall on each side so that it is strong, it's sturdy, and it can actually hold paint without the paint like spilling out. And so then I'm going to go back in and I'm realizing, hey, I actually don't want to have all of these really tiny circles. I'm going to have some big circles so I can have some paint slots for mixing paint instead of just a bunch of tiny slots. So I'm kind of like carving it out and saying like, hey, I kind of want this to be here and I kind of want this other circle to be here. And then I'm just going to go and use the loop tool and carve that out and try and get it as flat as possible without carving too deep. If you do carve too deep though, it is fixable. You just want to make sure that you don't have a super thin bottom, because if you have a super thin bottom, it is going to be very fragile and could break. Okay. So when you're carving this out, just notice like, oh, this is going to be a little bit too thin, and so then you can just take some extra clay and score it and use some vinegar and then pop that clay in there, blend it, and then try again. Okay, so here is an example of that. I accidentally carved this part too deep and whoops, there's a hole. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what I said earlier, where I take some vinegar and I put that in there and get some other clay, put some vinegar on that clay, and then just try and size it up so that it can fit in that slot. And then when I'm pressing it down, I'm going to blend it. And after I'm done blending it, then I will go in and I'll carve it again. This time I will make sure that I'm not carving too deep. I was getting a little bit like overzealous with the carving because I was like, dang, that these paint slots need to be a little bit deeper to actually hold the paint. And then I realized they don't really need to be that deep because I can make coils and build up walls around them to make them deeper. So you do not have to carve super deep out of your actual slab of clay. Okay, so here it is the next day. I had it all carved out, and then I'm going in with the serrated rib, which is the little metal rib with the teeth on it, and then I'm going in and I'm using some vinegar to put a coil on the area where I did it. So then now I'm taking a wooden tool and I'm just blending. So then now I have a wall, and then that is going to fit clay perfectly. And I'm just going over and over again in different areas where I'm like, hey, you know what? I feel like this little slot should have a wall. This little paint slot should have a wall. And then I'm going and I'm smoothing it out and just using those different tools that I had realized, hey, like this is really good for smoothing, like that little wooden tool. It's a weird shape. Okay. And so then I'm going in and adding more of the detail and the depth to the face of the moon and really just getting everything carved out exactly how I want it to have that depth and dimension. I don't want it to just be a flat piece of clay that has like little lines carved into it. I want the nose to have that depth where it goes back into where the eye socket is and where the cheek kind of bulges out a little bit and the lips bulge out a little bit. And so I'm just taking that wooden tool and I am just, again, experimenting with what works, what doesn't work, how to smooth everything out. And honestly, it took me over 2 hours to make this. And the way that I was able to get this video down to 13 minutes is by obviously fast forwarding it, but I cut out a lot of the times where I was just doing stuff over and over and over again because I wanted to be able to show y'all all the different tools I was using and all of the different techniques I was using to try and get this smoothed out. Okay, so the way that I was able to get this really smoothed out at the end is I found that the paintbrush worked the best. Like a wet paintbrush worked the best to smooth out. So I'm in here and I'm just adding those other details and getting everything the shape that I want it and getting like the walls the shape that I want it and everything. And then I'm going in scoring, making a coil. I'm going to score the coil, score the walls, and then I will put some vinegar on all the scored areas, score that coil, put vinegar on the scored coil, and then I'll put all of the scored areas touching each other so they kind of mesh like Velcro. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to blend with that wooden tool. So it's just scoring, slipping, which for slip for me, I use vinegar, and then blending. So do not forget score, slip, blend, score, slip, blend. Okay. So again, it is score, slip, blend. If you do not do all three of those things, your walls could fall apart, and that would really suck. So I'm just putting a bunch of walls on the little paint slots that seem like they're too shallow for paint, and then also trying to make it look balanced so there's not only a couple of them that have walls, so that it kind of looks like craters of the moon. And it really depends on whatever shape you are using for your paint palette. But for mine, I kind of wanted them to look kind of uneven and kind of a little bit messy, because if they were perfect circles, it wouldn't look like the craters of the moon as much as these kind of uneven layers of the walls do. And so again, I'm just blending using that wooden tool, and as you can see, it's kind of making it like a little bit more rough, and so I'm getting a little bit frustrated, and I was like, gosh, I really wish I was not wearing nails right now, because I cannot smooth these out. So I tried that little wooden tool that I'm like making go around in circles, kind of pressing it down, pressing the clay down, and then I'm like, God, and then now this wooden tool, it's kind of like scraping it up a little bit more. And so I was getting a little bit frustrated because I just could not get things as smooth as I wanted them and making them as clean as I wanted. And I literally probably spent over an hour just smoothing, and I was like, none of this is working. Why is this not working? And again, if I didn't have fake nails on, I would have been able to just use my finger and smooth it out, and it would have been so much easier and so much faster. But I got the majority of it smoothed out with these wooden tools, and then I was like, you know what, that rubber tool, I broke it, whoops, so why don't I try a pencil eraser? And so I was trying this pencil, and you know what, a sharpened pencil actually was really good for getting those little details and getting out all those little little balls of clay that like kind of show up when you're like carving out. And then I was like, this eraser is really great for smoothing out, because, you know, it's like a rubber tool. And then I was like, okay, but it's still not getting it as smooth as I wanted. And so then I got a paintbrush, and I just dipped the paintbrush in water, and it was so fast and easy to get everything smoothed out and cleaned up. Like, I really wish I used the paintbrush sooner, because that would have saved me so much time. Seriously, so much time. But anyway, so once you get it all smoothed out the way that you want it, what you're going to want to do is very lightly spray the inside of your bag, and then do not close the bag all the way. You want it to be like closed a little bit, but you do not want it to be tied tight. You don't want it to be folded over. You want to have a little bit of air getting into the bag so that it can slowly dry over the period of a week or so. And then once it's dry, then you can fire it. And then once it's bisque fired, then you can glaze it and then fire it again. And so that's what we're going to do. So I hope that this was helpful. And if any of y'all have any questions, you can comment them below, and I will answer your questions with a video if I need to. Bye, y'all.